Hi, folks. Happy Monday. I have some things I wanted to share with you about the role of our reward pathways in appetite and the drive to eat when we're not hungry. So, interestingly enough, sometimes my research comes out of me sitting there and struggling with something. And I'd had a few days of celebratory events with family, and I've been eating a lot of pasta and sugar, stuff I normally don't actually eat that often anymore now that I've lost the weight and I've gotten active and healthy and just doesn't really serve me well to have these processed foods a lot of the time. So I don't have them very often, but I'd had some and I was craving. I was craving more than I normally eat, beyond what calories my body needs for fuel every day. And being someone who's in recovery from self diagnosed food addiction, I have that genetic predisposition for more that addiction can have. And food was, for me, my drug of choice. And so eating for fuel, eating for the reasons that food is meant for was a big change for me. And when I have those moments where I am slipping and sliding inside, wanting to go with the more switch and knowing that I'm not going to feel good and it's not going to give me energy, I'm going to be tired and feel crappy for a few days, and my body's going to have to work really hard because I'm giving it more than it actually needs. I decided to do some research. That's what I've been doing to feed my recovery, is my new addiction to research and exercise. Those have been big ones for me. And also, you know what? The drive for learning, it's just such a happy one for me, and it really feeds my soul. So learn. The more I know, the more I can help myself and other people. All right, so reward driven eating. It got broken down in this research done by Ashley Gearhard into these three categories of wanting, liking, and salience. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what this means. So, wanting is that motivation or drive that we have for food. I want food. I'm really wanting something. Liking is about the pleasure we experience in response to having the food. So, I like this type of food. It's not just that I want it because I need it and I'm driven to have it because I need it for fuel, but the liking is the enjoyment piece around what I'm eating. And then the salience is the cues that we have that signal that food is available, that it's time to pay attention to food because food is important right now. And so our brain has this whole process it's going through of when to signal the importance of food. And so it's really interesting because in the recovery program I work in, we talk a lot about helping people to get sort of this mechanical schedule of mechanical eating where they eat every 2 or 3 hours and, they get what they need as far as fuel goes with the micro and macronutrients. And I work with these wonderfully intelligent dietitians that support people in figuring those pieces out. And as a psychotherapist, I'm working on the emotional components and what happens within us in that drive for food that feels very personal and very emotional at times for us. And so we think about this journey with food as one of those basic needs on that hierarchy of needs: food, shelter, clothing, right? As children, from the minute that we be born into this life, we have this desire for food. And it's interesting because even as a child, some exhibit greater activation in the neural regions associated with reward and motivation when it comes to food. And so you think, like, what is it in the genetic predisposition of a human being that makes them more appetized by pictures of food and more drawn to food, where they pay attention to it and they have this sort of attentional bias, we call it, towards having that sort of craving, that cueing that it's important, I need to pay attention. And I think what's really interesting is looking at stuff like food scarcity, where there's intergenerational trauma with the Great Depression and people not having access to food. And I find myself thinking about my grandmother because she used to keep extra food and put it in her purse because she was so worried that there wouldn't be food. And, we would look at it as kids and be like, Grandma, what are you doing? Putting the bun in the napkin in your bag. Like, you don't need to keep it. But she went through that time where scarcity of food was a real thing. And I find myself reflecting as I'm learning and growing with this literature around how that scarcity of food or food availability or lack thereof contributed to the sort of genetic adaptation in my generation from my grandma's to being attentive to food and craving food and making sure that we're getting it. And I know as human beings, there's that biological predisposition to crave the sugars and fats because in the environment of the world, before our time of having such easy to get food availability, we needed those sugars from those sweet foods, and we needed the fat because we didn't know when we'd see it again. And sort of like a bear hibernating for the winter, you got to fatten up because you're not going to eat for a while. And so we have that within us, even though it's not necessarily a necessary driver at this point. But this interesting thing for me was the fact that I've talked in another video about ultra processed foods, but there were these pictures of these foods that have that high level of sugar and fat, and they showed how the cravings for these foods were higher even in smaller children that experienced eating these foods. And so it's like somebody who's tried tobacco or drinks coffee, and they know they're going to get that hit in it from the serotonin dopamine. It's going to have these things that you're needing. And so your body feels very driven to find that food. And so eating food is it's really important for our growth and development, obviously. And we need to have some reward and drive to eat and take care of ourselves and get the nourishment. And so these neural pathways have been incredibly important to our survival. But that being said, what is making it for some of us that we want to eat beyond the fact that we're hungry, that we feel that strong association with food as a source of pleasure for the dopamine centers of our brain? And it's become one of the sometimes only things, at least I can speak for myself and some of the ladies I support, where it's that good old reliable, that good old faithful friend of food that's going to give us that dopamine fix. And so how do we distinguish between cravings that are unconscious and it's that neural activation because we're exposed to cues of even pictures of logos or pictures of food or food circuitry that's like wired for motivation beyond hunger, and when it's a craving because your body has needs, you have needs, you need to eat. So this is tough stuff. It's not easy stuff. And this motivational circuitry of seeking out food and doing it in this automatic way, there's so many pieces to it that can become part of our operating system as a person that's very unconscious. And so, it's something that feels like we're compelled to do it without thought, without conscious decision making. Like it's something that's this push to do it, and we're going, why, and it feels so powerful and so survival oriented that it's not just this want, it feels like an incredible need. So it's very, very hard sometimes to figure out what's going on. So this greater wanting and ratings of this greater wanting was done in this research that I've been looking at by Ashley Gearhard. And Ashley was looking at elevated cravings for calorie dense food. And this calorie dense food, that's the higher processed, higher fat content and sugar content food, was associated with stronger consumption of food, stronger excess eating, actually. So these individuals often were struggling with obesity, and there was a greater activation of the neural regions of their brain that make them motivated to go to seek food and to eat food and to be cued that food is needed. And so it was really hard because this part in our brain too, the stratum, is a response part of our brain that we need that cues us not to, lose all our weight and to keep putting food in to make sure that we're safe and that we're fed. And so with this cueing happening, we only have so much self-control. We really do. It's called self-regulation, and we only have so much of that as a resource in the day. And self-regulation gets depleted. And when our self-regulation gets depleted, it can become incredibly difficult to say no to those cravings and to just keep pushing through for something that we don't even know why at this point we're pushing through, because the cravings are so big and we're tired mentally and emotionally and physically with fighting back against them. And so it's a real thing, this struggle that we go through. And I have more to say on it. And if you want to hear some more about this and about this whole process of wanting, liking, and salience, importance of food to you at that moment, I'm going to do another video on this because I don't want to make these too long for you. So tune in another day and another time when you have an opportunity. We'll talk more about this concept. Thanks so much for listening and learning with me today.